back in business casual.
As usual, as always, and I was in the first video as well, if you were truly paying attention.
That shows you how, yeah, that shows how much I don't pay attention. I'm not very good at that whole style thing. But oh, animation. I wanted this is well. First of all, do you still do that anymore? Like, what happened? Why'd you stop doing that?
It's a really big, like, animation is a very hard craft for a child. Um, but no, it's just really it's hard to do things that I find it hard to do things that I was like proud of at the end, and so I'd put a lot of time in, and then at the end I'd be kind of underwhelmed with it. Um, I guess if like there was any big defining end point for my animation, it was I did this project called Summer Camp where I was like really stoked on it, and I was going to do this 10-episode mini-series and then try to use it as like a launching point to like become a professional cartoon maker in my 16-year-old conceptions. But I was just really let down with the first episode, and um, it was just too ambitious of a project for me at the time. And then after that, I just kind of was like, I don't know. I've done animation since then, and I do animations for Seriously Wrong, but
I
not
actually haven't
just.
seen this. It's on a YouTube channel?
Yeah, sometimes we'll just take clips of the podcast and put some kind of like talking heads to it and stuff.
Mhm.
But it's yeah, I'm very aware of like the time sink versus payoff connection.
Yeah.
Which animation is pretty bad for spending a lot of time. But it's
Yeah.
also like meditative and fun, and I'm definitely better at it now than I was when I actually did it all the time. So
Mm.
it's yeah. But
Technology probably got better, helped out a bit.
yeah,
Possibly.
definitely. And yeah, I subscribe to Adobe Creative Cloud, so I have access to the software. But it's just yeah, it's a time sink thing, especially when like we're doing a weekly podcast now, and so I do a lot of audio
Priorities.
editing.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll show up like in this interview. I'll often like start 3 or 4 sentences before I actually start the sentence that conveys the idea in the right way that I'd like to. But so we have to like I cut out easily 10 minutes of me starting sentences that never meant
Mhm.
anything or never were like there was some sort of framing device for the way that my brain was working out that angle to best talk about an issue.
Okay, you know what? I'm glad to hear that because I was like you come across so perfectly in the podcast. It's like, am I gonna be able to talk with this guy? Is he like, am I gonna be the only one stuttering here and just look like a complete fool? But no, it's good. Yeah, it's good. All right. If I feel better now, hearing you stutter. Rarely it's
Yeah.
fair, but still, you're human. Uh,
Yeah, no, I'm sickeningly human, like everyone else. See, if this was a podcast, I would have cut that line out. See, that's what the podcast is good for, as
Well,
far as
I know all about that. I mean, that basic income bit. I mean, that's so. I mean, I even cut out little like just like me breathing, like little imperfections. I mean, it's a little ridiculous to consider breathing an imperfection, but when people's attention is like dwindling so quickly, just so yeah, I there you go. I said I about 3 times, but yes, I have to edit myself heavily. Just to come across a little more, I don't know, less boring and quicker. So I don't like wasting people's time. I think that's part of it. But
yeah, and there's a charm to the live broadcast thing, and I know a
true.
lot of other podcasts will not edit out any aspect of it, and if they feel confident doing that, I'm all for it. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's like we'll record for an episode of Seriously Wrong that ends up being an hour or an hour and a half. We'll record easily twice that much often, um, say things different ways, and try to pick the best one. And because I think there's a feeling with both me and Aaron that what we're trying to express has relevance or is like needs to we try to make ourselves and our guests look like the best version of themselves, and we try to hear all different ideas and all different ideologies as the best version of those ideas. Um, so yeah, I don't think that the unedited tapes are so like horrifying. I wouldn't want the world to see them, but I'm conscious of the fact that I'm asking people for their time.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Now, I got. You said so with animation, you had like some pretty incredible success, especially for a 14-year-old with the Ultimate Showdown.
I was stoked. I was so
Yeah.
excited.
Were you like really popular at like? Did they love you at school or like?
Kind of. I don't. It was weird because the internet life, real life distinction was really, really strong. I didn't want to brag. I didn't like. I don't know. There's all these weird kind of like neuroses about it, I guess. But I didn't like talking about it with other people. I'd be kind of embarrassed if people brought it up.
Yeah.
But then after a while, I kind of like I got to a point maybe by the time I was 17 or 18 where other people talking about it in relation to me started to please me. Like up to that point, I was legitimately ashamed of it for some reason and
Isn't that
ashamed
weird?
of it.
Do you know why? Why is that? That's so weird. I have experienced that too. I don't know if like ashamed is the right word, but maybe just embarrassed for some reason.
I think people are embarrassed maybe to admit we're embarrassed to admit that we like being valued, that we like contributing.
Isn't that weird? That's really messed up. I think it's messed up.
No, it's some. I think it has to do with kind of like a cultural conditioning that's about this very the sunglass warrior idea, the idea of wanting to be cynical. I know I've met people before who've put their I'm just making sure we weren't having connectivity problems again.
No, I'm here. Moving.
I've met people before who I meet them one night or something, add them on Facebook, and their Facebook political views is the word cynical. Like that's not a political view. That's a choice to withdraw from politics in a way, and I think that's there's a cultural push in that direction. Which I can't actually remember how it connects to the beginning of the sentence now because of the connectivity thing.
We were talking about how there was something wrong with our upbringing for being.
To be ashamed to be ashamed having some success or talking about your own success in any way.
Yeah, or associating yourself with any value. Isn't that weird? It's so weird. But can you think of anything in your life that you can say, oh, that influenced me. That may have caused some of this shame.
Well,
response.
it's you don't want to be egotistical, and you don't want to be seen there's these pejorative terms for different people with big heads or people who are full of themselves, and but these ideas people always call Kanye West an asshole or say that he's egotistical and stuff.
You don't want to be Kanye West.
Yeah, people don't want to be Kanye West so bad that they don't have confidence in themselves.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah.
I think that's an angle on it. I don't like.
I think that's definitely part of it. Yeah, I'm. Yeah.
I don't have a what people think-ometer that I can measure what people think, but that's my theory.
I think there's something even bigger that we might be missing, but that's definitely part of it. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, yeah, so I wanted to ask you that one animation that you say you put so much time into and it just didn't live up to expectations, and it kind of ended the animation for you. Well, for a while anyway, that's what you said, right?
Yeah, it ended my devotion to it that I had.
All right, let me ask you, is that the Bears in Time one?
No?
No,
that's after. That's after.
Okay.
That's actually after, yeah.
Because go ahead. Tell me about Time Bears.
The Time Bears were introduced in summer camp in the first episode as a gag, but after summer camp kind of didn't work for me, or I just couldn't devote myself knowing how much work was ahead of me. I made some Time Bears episodes after that. It's just connected to summer camp in a weird way. I don't know. Felt the need to express that.
I have to tell you, there's this kind of weird or funny coincidence. So you did Time Bears.
Yes.
And just a couple of years ago, I did Time Cheetah. It's basically very similar. I mean, it's just anthropomorphic, mammal going through time, and fucking shit up. Supposed to be a hero, but usually it just fucks things up. In fact, always. And I just thought that was a funny coincidence. I never
Yeah.
actually, I never actually did the whole anime. I did the storyboard, and I pitched it to some network. And it's funny. That was in my 20s. You were doing all that when you were like 14. But anyway, thought that was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be some collective unconscious stuff. Ideas leaving one brain and going across the world, entering other brains.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like that joke that I just made is kind of like a defining thing for me. It's the way I look at Seriously Wrong, where you can say something so absurd and like obviously there's no scientific basis to say something like that is true, but it's actually something that some people believe. So us having Aaron and I are both very aware of like the spectrum of opinion, and we like to find out what people think, and so we try to build kind of we try to connect things that people think that they maybe wouldn't connect themselves. Like if we try to find, for example, like commonalities between libertarianism and feminism, or commonalities between anarcho-primitivism and transhumanism, just having like these polar opposites that ostensibly should disagree on everything. And I think we're very kind of trained. I don't like the metaphor of like brainwashing or being trained or whatever, but I think we're very imprinted to kind of have these conflict-oriented discussions with people from different ideological groups.
Well, it's also just a problem with words, and it's just like people associate so many things to one word, like liberal or
yeah,
and it's just not. And not only that, all these associate all these different word sentences, like freaking books, like to one word. And I'm sure you've talked about this in one of the podcasts. But the thing is, everybody is bringing their own books and definitions and associations to that word, and so it's just. I don't like talking about like liberal this, Democrat this, Republican this. Like I think it's always more less troublesome and more productive to just talk about issues like things that so everyone understands what the other person's saying.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a kind of maybe it's even evolutionary psychology when it comes to people from different groups than you perceive them differently. If you draw some sort of line between you and someone else, saying like, oh, I feel like a Democrat, and this guy, this new Republican's obviously, he's such a Republican, how could he ever do anything that I would support? And it goes the opposite direction, where obviously Republicans will be like, oh, you can only trust a Democrat as far as you can throw him. But like both sides are ridiculous as long as it's human, like as long as it's a human being and not just like a mindless representative of interest groups, which is what happens. But the human beings, I have, and like this is one of the controversial positions I've taken on the podcast, is that I have faith that politicians are human beings and not blood-drinking monsters. Although the two aren't exclusive.
Yeah.
someone, but yeah, when you talk about the specifics of politics and you're talking about names and stuff, it takes on a different tone than if you're kind of dreaming of a different world. So talking about basic income is maybe more accessible than explaining why Barack Obama is a good or bad president.
Yeah. Let's see. How do we get off politics? Let's see. Was there anything you wanted to talk about? I was curious. Like you said, you mentioned like you might be interested in collaborating. Like, did you have anything in mind, or you were just throwing that out there?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Okay. I like to make various types of content, and it's always good to have like another mind to bounce off of. I think the reason that Seriously Wrong has been good is because I was lucky enough to meet Aaron, and yeah, we just really clicked. So I don't know. I try to always, like, not a lot of people have taken me up on it, but I always try to throw the, like, we could collaborate also. Like, I don't know. Like I mentioned, I animate. I could do, if there was something, if you needed an animated little thing, we could talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it takes a long time. Like I obviously like yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's and I also yeah, but that's cool. I was thinking like similar things, like um, I don't know. Like we both know how much time goes into anime. Uh,
Yeah, well, it's weird because, like, yeah, I don't know. It's like I put it behind there's some ideological thing where, like, oh, I'm technically an animator, but like,
don't want to do
it's
it.
really,
Don't want to. Yeah, like spend your whole life doing that drawing.
yeah, or yeah, like there's just so much. I think, like, when people used to find out I was an animator when I was younger, they would ask me to animate their ideas, and I had to say no a lot because
Yeah.
a lot of people
Yeah.
have a lot of, like, ideas that you don't support as an as an individual. Like, that's one of the
Or
bad
even if they
parts of
support it, it's like,
collaboration.
is it worth spending this much time on?
Yeah,
X
yeah, like, oh,
amount of time.
I would love to send away your script to some sort of animation factory and have your animation come back, but sitting at the computer for the 16 or 32 hours it's going to need to create this 2-minute animation. Yeah.
Yeah, here's what I propose is like if as far as like collaborating in what you said, like it's so helpful having somebody to toss ideas off of. Yeah, I mean, yeah, toss me any ideas and I'll give you like a critique and my thoughts, and maybe I'll do that sometime with you if that's cool, because that's really that's the big help.
Yeah, I think it's really important that people who are creating creating stuff that mixes these worlds of, like, activism and politics and just, like, conscious content. It's important that we network with each other and try to find mutual aid scenarios, or to use, like, the language of the Wealth of Nations. Like, we can like Adam Smith.
I
I've
know
been
the
reading.
book. I haven't read it though.
If I summed it up last night when I was a little bit drunk, as the entire book means basically that if France has a bunch of soybeans and England has a bunch of of wheat, there's no need for them both to grow the other person's thing. They can just trade. So that's, like, the central idea of the Wealth of Nations, which is actually a revolutionary concept at the time because, from my understanding at that time in world history, all trade was kind of trade was more managed somehow. I'm kind of blanking on the details, actually. But the free market revolution was against this idea of mercantilism, which was a controlled market. And so it was a revolutionary, cool idea. It was a free, liberating idea. But then obviously there's huge critiques of the free market idea now, and how it's unfolded. And you could argue this isn't a true free market on Earth right now.
Sure.
I know a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But
Well, back to again, away from the politics, but I mean, it's all good stuff. But, speaking of animation, I think I'm about to blow your mind. Allow me to blow your mind, if I will. Now,
okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think animation just might be getting a little easier to do, actually. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like, isn't this amazing? I don't know. So I just thought you might enjoy this. Were you aware of this? That you could
No,
do
I
that?
wasn't. I didn't know that existed.
All I did was press a button, and like it's moving. It is going with my face. Like, amazing. Yeah.
Automated video stuff. I see that is totally possible. Like,
It's amazing. Like, because think about like how much easier it is for me to move my head like this instead of like click,
Yeah, even
keyboard, click, drag, keyboard.
yeah, dragging that around and resizing it
Yeah.
to do that exact animation would take me a long time.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah.
especially with if you think about like CGI models or like like the skeletons of these CGI models moving around, you could take the the patterns that they moved in and make other models do it. So if you make one walk cycle, you could make everything with the 3D model, and you can make anything walk the same way that you've already made this other thing walk, and look at it from any angle. And um, so I bet you a lot of traditional animators would find that idea like horrible. But
Well,
like
because it makes some of them, I don't know, lose a job again. Like I mean, this is automating animation right here. This is I've automated this motion tracking. I don't know. Hmm. Okay,
yeah,
enough. It's very hypnotic for me, but all
it's
right.
the way that it resizes and stuff. It is very fluid and hypnotizing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that would scare a lot of traditional animators. But under the basic income system or having a citizen's dividend,
Sorry.
these animators would be free to. They'd have the quote, kind of startup capital from society to just spend all their time animating and make traditional animation without it needing to be a job, because maybe it's not going to be cost efficient to do frame by frame animation anymore. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that frame by frame animation isn't beautiful and like a type of art that should be preserved.
Mm-hmm. Yep, true that. And let's see. Yeah, we'll start wrapping up. But let me ask you about Patreon. What are your thoughts on Patreon or just um, crowdsourcing? Like, how are you? Are you really gonna try something like this to use Patreon? Like, well, first let me ask you your seriously wrong thing. Are you How are you balancing that with bills and stuff? Are you able to? How are you doing it? Are you planning to you know change something to like, dedicate all the time to more time than once a week to seriously wrong or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, ideally, anytime that you're doing something that you love, you want to not do other things. And that's the same for the Seriously Wrong podcast and kind of the website and the animations and stuff. I'd love to do this instead of my job, but I do have a job and I work 5 days a week. And as a building attendant in the downtown east side,
Hmm.
here in Vancouver. But um,
Can you tell me what is a building attendant?
it's like a mixture. It's like 30% janitor, 70% security guard, kind of.
Okay, see, I wasn't sure if you were being like sarcastic or not with the mopping the floors. Like if you meant like specifically, no, you really are mopping the floors, or
I do mop
yeah,
floors. Actually,
yeah.
I think Aaron also mops floors sometimes at his work, but I can't be sure on that. See, I like the dissonance because I like to think that we're doing pretty high level intelligent content, and then being able to drop in that I
Mm-hmm.
thought of this when I was mopping the floor. There's some sort of I don't know.
You're
There's like
fucking.
the
Oh my God, what is it? It's the real life. You know, you're the Matt Damon movie.
the Matt Damon movie. Yeah, this archetype exists. Like Aaron and I mopping floors. We find a chalkboard. We like finish off an
Yeah,
equation.
yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's a cute archetype, like the popper with the ideas or something. But yeah,
Uh,
I would. I do. I have been talking to Aaron about figuring out ways to try to get funding for what we're doing, so we can, if not quit our jobs, work less.
mhm.
So we could, you know. But I think a big part of it, and it's something that I'm like still really learning how to do, is just be responsible with the money that I've earned. And like,
Ooh, that's very big. Yeah, that's very, very big.
I eat out at restaurants way too much
You
right
gotta
now.
learn how to cook, man. Learn how to cook.
I do know how to cook, but then at the moment I'm like, it's really, I just want this
Yeah.
burrito.
Especially if you're coming like from work, you're like, like I'm really hungry now.
Yeah, yeah. If you're tired, it's something that I think working 5 days a week really. I A lot of people's criticisms of capitalism that I hear, I think, are just kind of misplaced criticisms of work culture. And I think work culture is a very specific, like, there's a lot of very specific things associated with work, like working 40 hours a week that affect, kind of has a cascading effect on the rest of our lives in a really horrible way. Because you're so tired from work, and I think there's just something innately, maybe not damaging, but like painful or hurtful or just less than desirable about doing shit that you don't want to do. And I'm not saying that people should never have to do shit they don't want to do, but because at the end of the day, you need to make the system work somehow. But I don't have any specific pitch as far as that. But
Mhm.
I think being somewhere for 8 hours and hating it is bad for you. I don't know if that's a scientifically backed perspective.
I'm pretty sure it is somewhere. Like stress, like that's bad for your health, and like being like just also being unhappy, depressed, that affects your health, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, and there's this cultural myth, this folk wisdom that there's something called laziness, and that it's used by people to attack other people. It's not a real thing. Like people will tell me like complimentary things about how I'm not lazy, but I can't, like, fuck that compliment. Like, you can't call someone pretty without implying that someone's ugly. You can't call
Mhm.
someone not lazy without saying they're lazy people. But I don't think laziness is a real, like, everyone wants to be valued. Everyone wants to be part of a community. People
Mhm.
are alienated from that in different ways, and maybe if someone's really depressed, they might not like want to clean
Yeah.
their room or something. But that's not laziness. I don't think laziness is like a feature that exists in any objective way. It's a framing device that's really actually kind of oppressive and limiting to human beings.
Yeah, I think either, if you're calling somebody lazy, I hadn't really thought about this too much before, but I guess if you're calling somebody lazy, um, okay, if somebody you might call lazy, there's probably a good chance like they're depressed and unhappy, and that is why they may be acting lethargically. Like it's just there's
Yes,
something, right?
they're alienated from life somehow.
Yeah, and then another thing is maybe they're, um, yeah. Let's see, tell me what you think of this example. Let's say somebody, you might call it some guy lazy because he spends all day like just watching sports and talking about sports and researching sports and reading about sports and talking about sports more. But he's actually exerting a ton of energy on that.
Yeah, on sports. Yeah, this guy
Yes.
is a sports expert. And
Yes.
society, we've got a holistic, within the framework of society, we have room for people to like different things. Ideally, and like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy talks about sports all the time and watches sports and plays sports instead of instead of doing
Working
dishes.
instead of sitting in an office chair.
Yeah, no, it's
And the
ridiculous.
guy sitting in the chair he's the one that's not lazy. The other guy's lazy. The sports guys, he's the lazy one.
Well, and work culture is the biggest justification for laziness at the same time. Like, we're talking about leaving work and being tired and being like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to eat this shitty food because it's easier than cooking. Like, people will use the fact that they've worked, that they've exerted the energy doing something they don't want to do for 8 hours to be like, now all bets are off. Like, I can just indulge myself in whatever I
True.
want.
Yeah.
So I think we really need to be liberated from work culture somehow. I don't know what the shape of this revolution is going to look like. I think it's
It's going to
as
involve
far as
basic income, I hope. It better, or otherwise it might not be too pretty. Yeah.
yeah. So one I know only through the internet made a really interesting point to me about basic income.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like it's out of my weight class to say whether or not this is true, but I just thought it was an interesting perspective. He argued that the way that rents are set by landlords for workers
Mm-hmm.
are based on how much they can afford to pay. They're based on how much people are willing to give up. And he argued that basically a basic income, unless there was some sort of taxation on being a landlord,
Mm-hmm.
a
Or
basic income would inevitably.
go ahead, finish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that the
It wouldn't
basic
work.
income essentially goes to landlords in
Okay.
abstract, or goes to um, which he argues for. He's a Georgist, and he argues for a land value tax, which again I'm it's completely out of my weight class. I just have a very basic grasp of economics at this point.
I mean, me too. I don't consider myself an expert by any means, but I do enjoy, checking out the basic income subreddit and articles occasionally. And yeah, the land tax and property tax or land, is one way to counter that problem that people see. Like your friend said. Also, but here's another thing. It's like, yeah, but people could also, if you have just enough, $1,000 a month or whatever, like you're so much more mobile. So and we do have a market system, right? So
yeah,
so tons of people could move to Detroit.
That's a good point.
Everything's dirt cheap, and and they're bringing money. All of a sudden, that transforms Detroit. Things are better.
That's something that's a really good point. And that's like I find the more that I end up thinking about income or the citizens' dividend and these associated ideas, the more I'm just like, wow, that would really change blank for that would really make journalism work again. That would really make it would make these aspects of human life and the human experience that are kind of being pushed to the side by distortions of the market system. It allows these things to flourish, like traditional animation or journalism.
Everything. The question is really, it's really like, what would not be like? There's everybody would benefit from this. The examples are endless. Like you can think of everybody you know. We can go through everybody you know, and they're probably. I can't think of how they would not benefit from this.
Yeah, but I guess the question is that people would bring up is like, where does the money come from? Where that people are being paid?
Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is, well, we already have the money, and I did go in just a tiny bit in the video, but we're spending so much money on an inefficient welfare system. You take out the bureaucracy and just give the money to everybody. So you save. So instead of using that money to spend on bureaucracies and departments, turning away people who need help, checking applications, over and re-reviewing. Just it's so much more efficient. Just give the money directly to the people. Also, yes, we may have to. I don't think we would even have to increase taxes so much. We would absolutely have to. Cut out the tax breaks for the richest 1% and these corporations that are with offshore bank accounts and tax loopholes going to Ireland like Google and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a ton of money right there.
Yeah, and if we're gonna, I despise income tax for just the visceral emotional reason of like looking at my paycheck and seeing that I have less money. Mm-hmm. And I think I think it's one of the wackest things the government does is take people who are relatively poor and like compared to these international financiers, these international,
and tax and take more money from them. I mean that's
like
insane.
A little off their paycheck, just to be like, the government loves you, like, hey, thanks for supporting the gov. But if we're talking about increasing taxes anywhere, I think the thing that makes the most sense to me, although it's a little hard to figure out, is drawing a distinction between earned and unearned income, because there are places where money comes from, like high frequency trading machine.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think capital gains. I mean, is that really how earned? I wouldn't consider that earned income.
Yeah, like investing in the stock market or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you getting interest off that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
the issue now is the issue. I mean, are you aware of that? How that gets a lower tax rate than you mopping floors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No,
That's so messed up.
yeah, and maybe there's a spectrum between, earned and unearned, and we could find tax based on that. Where something like this is actually, this is a GOist idea. The same people who talk about the land value tax, because they think that land value increasing in cost is an unearned thing that needs to be taxed, essentially. But also like the fruits of the land. So like when you're mining mineral resources, that's being collectively taken from the people of that nation.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that made me think of the whole Alaska Permanent Fund. You're familiar with that?
No, no.
Okay. Well, so there is some form of a basic income in Alaska. Basically, and it's been going on for years now. I'm not sure how far back it goes, but the profit that the state makes from oil drilling, they share that with the all the citizens. So every citizen gets like 1,000. Obviously the amount that everyone's given every year fluctuates based on how much money is being made off the resources. But I believe it's gone up to $3,000 at some point.
Huh. I think there was something similar in Alberta here in Canada with the tar sands, that there was some sort of tax break being given out based on the oil wealth. Which I guess is kind of like a cool Band-Aid thing. Anytime that you're giving people free money, I kind of support that. I think giving, it makes more sense for example, when central banks, like this is a process that's really hard to understand and wrap your mind around, but when central banks print money out of nothing and then hand it to other banks as gifts or as low interest loans, it would make more sense to me to distribute that money that's printed to poor people and have poor people spend their money, because poor people, compared to rich people, spend a much higher percentage of their paycheck. Often they spend more than they have.
I mean, we've already spent, enough. Let's see, has it been enough? I believe we spent enough, as much on quantitative easing and bailouts as that would have supported basic income for a year, which would have made a huge difference.
Yeah, and since the financial crisis, all this money that's being pumped into the system through these various means disproportionately being caught up by the already super wealthy. So it's created a situation where I'm not sure if people I've definitely noticed in the last couple of years the cost of everything that I buy going up by like 40%.
Yeah. I've noticed too. Although there's one great pizza place that just hasn't caught on, and you can still get a great big Italian sub for $5. It's amazing. But other than that one exception, that inflation.
Yeah, other than these marketplace heroes, who hold on and say, no, I'm not going to just take all the money I can get. I want to give people great sandwiches. That's what I'm truly passionate about.
That is great. I think also part of it is they're just not aware of how inflation works and the devaluation of our currency. But it's because they're so focused on actually providing a product they care about.
Yeah, and when basic income would support that, if you really truly love sandwiches and you're getting a basic income, you can afford to make sandwiches at a loss and hand them out if you want.
Yeah. Good. Yes, man. Great stuff. Or volunteer. I mean, people would basically, if they want to make sandwiches for basically creating volunteer. Anybody can become a volunteer if they want to.
Yeah. I think people, there's some sort of dichotomy between workers and lazy people in the popular consciousness that I've talked about, which never ever existed and never will exist, because people want to be valued more than anything. People want to be accepted and they want to contribute. And if someone was telling me there's no jobs available for you, for you, but your bio-survival, your basic monetary needs is taken care of, I'm going to do something that I enjoy. Like I'm going to do things that I enjoy, and I'm probably also going to do things in service of others, because that's one of the best ways to be happy about yourself, is to help other people.
It is,
So,
yeah, and that is scientifically proven.
yeah, it's a deeper type of happiness to contribute to a community than just look out for yourself. And it's also, I think,
And it does benefit you too. It does. I mean.
yeah, no, yeah, helping other people helps you. That's the really generous interpretation of the idea of the free hand of, or the invisible hand of the market. Yeah, the metaphor that Joseph Smith uses, no, Adam Smith, not Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Adam Smith uses in The Wealth of Nations the invisible hand. He's referring to, it's misinterpreted in the current day to mean if anyone is trying to serve themselves, that means it's going to help other people. That by helping yourself, you help other people is what people think the invisible hand means. But he actually means the opposite. By helping others, you actually help yourself. And that's the rising tide lifts all boats idea. That's the idea that.
Yeah, just to sum that up, like, it's more simply, as I stutter in a very not simple way, but so the invisible hand, and I thought about this too. I think this is interesting. So people interpret the invisible hand of capitalism. It's greed that spreads the wealth to where it should go. Greed, right? Like you said, helping yourself actually helps other people somehow. Well, yeah. But greed doesn't do that. The invisible hand is not greed. It is empathy. That is what the invisible hand is. It's empathy, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good framing. No, I think that's clever. Like, because that's the same concept basically that Adam Smith was getting at.
Let's see. All right. It's been a while. Do you want to anything we should do to wrap this up, or anything you want to hit before we move on to your podcast and my YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, everyone should check out my podcast and send it to every person that they've ever met, for sure. And we're at the start of a really big process right now in America, like North America, so the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, of ending the drug war. We're just at the beginning of it, and there's going to be, like, we can see that with the legalization of cannabis in specific states, and politicians in Canada are talking about doing it also. It's not, the victory is not legalizing weed. Legalizing weed is, we can have a festival, everyone can dance, and it's like, yeah, there's one less stupid arbitrary law. But after weed is legalized, there's a huge amount of progress to still be done on the damage the drug war has done. So that involves, like, freeing nonviolent drug offenders, and I'm even open to the idea of, like, reparations for people who went to jail for dealing drugs. Like, going to jail for dealing drugs is not evil. It's like, and the system fucks up people's lives. I'm not prescribing that specifically, but I just think that there's a lot of things we can do to remedy the situation of the drug war internationally and locally, and legalizing weed is the beginning of that, but it's not. It's something that's going to happen. I think that's what's important about it too, because people always talk about how things never change, everything's corrupt, everything's hopeless. It's nonsense.
Things are changing.
Yeah,
entire states have changed the law. It's happening.
So yeah, we look at gay marriage and look at legalizing marijuana to say, okay, well, if people organize and people collaborate and talk to politicians and work it out, we can actually change the system. And so I think that, yeah, we're at the start of huge battles on both of those fronts. One for the battle of, like, basic freedom, and mostly the freedom from going to jail. Like, going to jail and living in a cage is a horrible way to. A fucking terrible thing to happen to a human being.
Yeah.
And that freedom is more important than just like it's a superficial freedom to be able to smoke weed. It's cool if that's what you're into, but the real freedom is not going to jail for smoking weed.
Yes.
And that's that angle, the kind of prison reform, looking at punitive like punishing people who have done things wrong versus rehabilitating and stuff. These are all huge ideological battles that are already gaining ground, and we can say within our lifetimes we can put our hands on the levers and help these changes happen. And then also with the LGBT thing, I think it's the peak of a bigger struggle, which is just about identity and the right to define yourself. Because a lot of people, and the laziness thing kind of ties to this, because accusing people of being lazy is taking away some of their autonomy from them. That's why it's so painful to be on the receiving end of a criticism like that, is because someone will be like, you're lazy, and you're thinking, it's up to me whether or not I'm lazy, and I say I'm not. And so like that dissonance is painful for people, because you're by labeling someone, you're taking something away from them. People should only be able to label themselves. I'm not saying people shouldn't be able to label people, but like in an ideal nonviolent way, the most nonviolent way to interact with someone is to not label them, or to, like, have you ever noticed that people don't like it when you mention any aspect of their appearance at all? Like, you have to really be friends in order to do that. Be like, you're tall, you're short, you have freckles, you don't, you have dark hair, you have blonde hair. It's like, how's the weather up there? I notice all blonde people are, I don't know. It's like, it's nonsense. And people don't like it either. People like to define themselves. And that's what I see being tied into, like, it's gay marriage now, but in the future it's going to be the right to plastic surgery. It's going to be the right to have an avatar represent you on the internet that doesn't actually look like you. Change your name as much as you want, as many times as you want. These are all things that just make sense. Like, why limit that? Like, what they may be, you could argue they're superficial freedoms, but I think it's nonsense that you can't change your name as many times as you want, for example, and it's superficial compared to being a transgender person who isn't accepted by their community because they perform gender in a way that is not acceptable to their family or something like that. Like, that's a very real, visceral, painful thing to experience, but at the same time it's connected to this larger issue of, we get to define ourselves, you don't get to define us. So that's my rambling point.
All right, thank you so much, Shawn. If you liked anything, from this, check out Seriously Wrong, amazing podcast, SRSLY, Wrong. Thanks again, Shawn.
Thank you very much, Matt.
All right, have a good rest of the day, man.
Yeah, see ya.